Now that we've finished algebraic expansion, we're going to learn how to do essentially the same thing in reverse, which is to take something in expanded form and put it back into two binomials being multiplied. And that process is called factoring. So let's start with a very easy example. X squared plus 8x plus 7. So how do we put this back into two binomials? Well, we just think, what are two numbers that multiply to this 7 here? That would be 1 and 7. So we can write x plus 1 times x plus 7. And if you look at it, we see that when we would expand this, this is indeed x squared plus 7x plus x plus 7, which would be x squared plus 8x plus 7. Another simple example here. What are two numbers that multiply to 5? That would be 1 and 5. X plus 1 times x plus 5. And if we were to expand this back, this would be x squared plus 6x plus 5. So this works. So what you want to do is find two numbers that multiply to the number here and add to the number in front of the x. Now in these examples it was pretty easy because there was only one possibility of numbers that multiplied to this number here. But if we look at something like this, here we have two sets of numbers that can multiply to 6, either 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. So we have to think which of those pairs adds to 5. Is it 1 and 6 or 2 and 3? It would be 2 and 3. So we're going to write x plus 2 times x plus 3. Same thing with this one. Numbers that multiply to 22 are either 1 and 22 or 2 and 11. So which pair adds to 13? That would be 2 and 11. Now, as we get into more examples, there are going to be more and more possibilities. So what are two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 7? Well, we have 1 and 12. That doesn't add to 7. 2 and 6 does not add to 7, but 3 and 4 do. So this is going to be x plus 3 times x plus 4. Two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 10. So we have 1 and 16, 2 and 8, or 4 and 4. It's going to be 2 and 8. A lot of numbers that multiply to 24 here. So what two numbers add to 14? Well, if you think it's not going to be anything too high like 24, it's going to be x plus 12 and x plus 2. Now, if you look at this one here, we have the same number, 24 here. But because this number is lower, we want lower numbers in the binomials. So what two numbers multiply to 24 and add to 11? That's going to be 8 and 3. So what we see here with these two examples is that each one has different pairs of numbers that multiply to 24. But because the number in front of x is different, because they need to add to different numbers, we end up with a different result. All right, now let's bring in some minuses. X squared minus 6x plus 5. Well, think about this. We need two numbers that multiply to 5. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's only 1 and 5. But we need to end up with a negative number here. So that means we need some negative factors. Another possibility of numbers that multiply to 5 is -1 and -5. And if you think about that, -1 plus -5 is -6. So remember that negative factors are also a possibility. Now here, we need to multiply to -8 and add to 2. So if we need to multiply to -8, in order to get a negative result, that means we're going to have one positive number and one negative number. Now, since we need to add to a positive number, that means we need it to add to positive 2. That means the positive number has to be 2 greater than the negative number. So possible factors of 8 are 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. So in order to multiply to 8, in order to add to 2, we need to have x plus 4 and x minus 2. Now with this one, once again, because we need it to multiply to a negative number, we're going to have one positive and one negative. And this time we need the negative to be 4 greater so that we add to -4. So factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6. There we go. 2 and 6 are 4 apart. And we need the -1 to be greater. So we're going to have x minus 6, x plus 2. The negative is 4 greater than the positive, so we add to -4, and we multiply to -12. Once again, negative number here, so we need one positive factor and one negative one. The positive one has to be 7 greater, so that we add to positive 7. So we have a lot of factors of 60. So let's think, which two are 7 apart? That would be 12 and 5. And since we need to add to positive 7, that means 12 is going to be positive and 5 is negative. Now with this one, it might be a bit confusing because we need to add to a negative number, but multiply to a positive number. So with this, you need to once again remember that another way to multiply to a positive number is to have both factors be negative. So what are two negative factors of 36 that add to -15? Or you could just look at it as what two factors of 36, meaning two numbers that multiply to 36, add to 15. That would be 12 and 3. But since we need to add to -15, both 12 and 3 are going to be negative. And because a negative times negative equals positive, we're still going to end up with positive 36 when we multiply. With this one here, we need to find two factors of, sorry, this should be minus 80. Okay. So since we need to multiply to a negative number, we need one positive and one negative factor. They need to be 11 apart so that they can add to negative 11. So what two factors of 80 are 11 apart? That's going to be 16 and 5. And since we need to add to a negative number, that means the larger number 16 is going to be negative, and the smaller number will be positive. Okay, so these are just a few examples, but we covered most of the different types of basic trinomials that you will see for factoring. This is something that takes a lot of practice to get good at so that you can do it quickly and not make errors. So you should definitely do some practice before moving on to the next video where we get into much more advanced factoring.